Here's my unfiltered personal story of how I landed a congressional internship. So pretty much during the pandemic, I remember speaking to my sister. I was so honestly, I was in such a rut. I just didn't know what to do. I wasn't getting internships. That was my first year of college when the pandemic hit, and I had gotten my associate's degree in high school, so I was graduating early from college. The goal was to do 2.5 years, and I was already entering my second year, and I had no internships. So I was getting worried. I was like, man, what's gonna happen with my career? And what I ended up doing is I just applied. I applied to a Senate internship, and then I applied to a U.S. House of Representatives internship. Well, I applied to first to the Senate internship, and then I applied to I think it was Partnership for Public Service internship. And as I was doing these applications, I just kind of sent it out, tried my best on my own, and neither of them stuck. This was a spring semester to get into an internship for the spring semester of when was it? It was either the spring or the summer of 2021. And that was already my second year. I was supposed to be graduating in the fall of 2021. So, mind you, you can already imagine the kind of worries I was having, the kind of things that I was dealing with in my mind to think, am I going to get it or not? And at that point, something my brother had told me during the pandemic was they're going to start asking you internships and jobs. People are going to start asking you, what did you do during the pandemic? Right? What did you do that was different? And my initial instinct was, okay, then I'm going to talk about my internships that I did. And no, I didn't get any at that point. Um, the year before, March, I think it was May of 2020, I started a podcast with a friend. A friend and I had always been talking about politics. We were both Model UN students. And for those of you who don't know, Model United Nations is a form of debate that you do in college. And we were both part of this team, and the team was honestly so toxic on all sides. Just politically speaking, everyone would rile up each other in their own politics, their own views. And a year like 2020 with racial issues, with social issues, and an election year and a pandemic, it magnified everything 10x pretty much. So what I ended up doing is I did a podcast. I did a podcast with a friend. I had no idea how to do a podcast. I had no media experience. All I knew was that if you can do a Zoom call, you can record. And I had a free Zoom account with my university. And so we ended up just doing it. And I always tell people I started in the garage because my first episode was literally in the garage of my home. Not that that was necessarily the place where I felt was best to do it. It was just that the sound was better, and I was secluded from everybody. And I went on to do this for a whole year. We made 19 episodes. And I think that if you're going to be in the 1% of podcasters, you need to make like a roughly 20 episodes in order to be in the top 1% of podcasters. And just sticking to it like twice a month for a year, we got 19 episodes in. I don't know if the math is 100% correct, but a bi-weekly submission of an episode. Some weeks we didn't, some weeks we did. And I ended up working on that podcast for a year, and we got like some pretty significant guests on it. A lot of classmates of mine that were well respected in the university. Also, somebody that was that was actually um, they had actually ran for Congress in Pennsylvania, I believe. And so it was honestly a pretty unique experience. At that point, I had already known, like, I already had some pretty good connections in politics, particularly because I'd gone to some Turning Point conferences. For those of you who don't know, Turning Point is a conservative movement that started in the early 2010s, early to mid 2010s, and they began doing conferences across the country. And even if you're not conservative, the kind of exposure you get in those conferences is pretty crazy. I mean, you're like talking to all these like congressmen, politicians, like people that you see on the news, and you just see them walking past you, and they're very generous. I mean, you buy a plane ticket and you pay $45 for like the whole conference, but they gave you the hotel, they gave you lunch, they gave you this, they gave you that. It's like it was pretty generous when I went. I had just turned 18, so finally was able to enjoy a little bit of the freedom going to that conference. I went to one in DC, and then in I went to one in West Palm. I did not put that on my resume. Maybe I could have. Maybe I could have, but I didn't. There was just two conferences. But I did have the connections, is what I'm talking about. I did have a good amount of connections that I just didn't tap into. I was 18. I was a little more insecure. Didn't want everybody to see my podcast. And I was very like, perhaps walking on eggshells. Like the podcast was meant to be bipartisan. It was not meant to be idealistic to one side or the other. If you want to check it out, it's called The Missing Bridge in America. That was my podcast. This will all make sense towards the congressional internship. So what ends up happening? I ended up doing this podcast for a year. And mind you, the year is 2020. I'm in my first year of college. Then 2021, I'm in my second year of college. And at this point, I have one more semester before I graduate. And I had to kind of cut off my we had mutually cut off this point of doing the podcast at a point where I just really wanted to focus on getting internships. So, mind you, I told you I already applied to these summer internships. I didn't get them, and I didn't know what to do. But I was really attracted to this one internship with a congressman in my district, and doing this research and seeing the opportunity arise, I'm like, he has a office option in Miami, or he also has a DC option. And I was like, at that point, I was like, I think I'm competitive for the office one in Doral. I live in Doral, and I grew up in Doral, and I'm a constituent. I'm like, oh, I already know how to sell myself. At that point, I was like, oh, I was in Model UN. I was not the best delegate in the Model UN team, but I at least was on the team, and I had done some internships in high school that maybe could help me out. And I was getting some pretty good grades at that point. So I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm competitive. I guess it can work. And then I was like, let me muster up the courage to put the podcast on my resume. And so I put the podcast on my resume, and I'm like, okay, this looks a little more complete because I don't have prior internship experiences relevant, but I do have some administrative work experience from high school that's very limited. And then my podcast. And so this all kind of came full circle where my brother was telling me, he was like, okay, they're going to start asking you what you did during the pandemic. And then it pushed me to, like, me always wanting to do a podcast. Even in high school, my friends and I would talk about basketball. We like basketball, to do a podcast about basketball. And we never did it. And so doing all these different things, I ended up pursuing that path, and I kind of made a cutoff point, but I still put it on my resume as if it was something present. It was something very recent that I had been doing. And it had already grown to, we had already done a lot of episodes, so it was pretty reasonable to put on my resume. And then looking at the statistics, I mean, I would just be like thousands of followers, thousands of listeners, because I think we reached like 1,000 listeners or 1,000 like plays. I'm like, yeah, it technically works. It technically works. So I put that on my resume, and then I have this a little bit of a dilemma when it comes to applying to this congressional internship. I had already gotten not I hadn't received any answer. I hadn't received any answers from the Senate internship, and I also had not received an answer from the Partnership for Public Service. I think that one I did get back to them. They got back to me, and I didn't get it, which I thought was more competitive for a Senate internship, a Partnership for Public Service, which is a think tank. I think I'm more competitive for a think tank than a Senate internship. Whatever. At this point, I was like, I gotta cut my losses. I haven't got an interview, and the internship starting soon, so I'm just gonna assume it's not gonna happen. So spring semester starts, none of them come through, and I see this congressional opportunity, and at that point, I'm still a little limited in my mindset, and I'm like, should I apply for the Miami office or the DC office? Because I could only apply to one. And I was like, man, at this point, the Miami office seems more reasonable. At that point, getting a congressional internship anywhere was going to make me happy. It was going to I was like, oh my god, if I can get this internship, oh my god, I'll be like flying through the clouds. So what ends up happening, I end up going to a webinar. Shout out Diego Zambrano. I go to a webinar with Diego Zambrano. He had been working for, I believe, Congressional Hispanic Leadership Institute, which is an organization that helps Hispanic students land internships in Congress. And he happened to do a webinar with FIU at the time. Forgot to mention, I went to FIU, Florida International University, and FIU actually has an office in DC. And I never had reached out to them, but I decided to go to a webinar with them. I'd known about the person that ran FIUDC at the time. His name is Eric Feldman, and I had met him. I had even met him like my first year, like even before I started university. I had met him. Like I had went to like a federal conference that my university was hosting, but I didn't know anything about agencies and like I don't know the DOJ, the Department of State, and all that stuff. I was like, I don't know about any of this. Like I don't think any of this is for me. Then I hear people applying to 37 jobs before they got an offer, and I'm like, I'm just so confused. I don't know. This is too much. But there was an FIUDC plug in that conference, and I ended up meeting Eric Feldman. And I'm like, okay, it's interesting. You guys do internships in DC. They connect people to internships. They help people get internships. I'm like, my self esteem was very low. I was like, okay, I mean, maybe it's not for me, but that's pretty cool that like even some people in this university go to DC for internships. Like that's pretty crazy to me. So that ends up happening. Fast forward, I go to this webinar. I asked a question. This is a very important question. I was like, listen, I have good grades. I do model UN. I did this and that. I don't know if I mentioned my podcast. I was like, I don't know if I should apply for the DC internship or the Miami internship. I explained my situation, that I hadn't gotten into internships and all that. And he was like, go big or go home. Someone from DC, someone with an authority position. He was like, I suggest you go for the DC option. And I was like, man, I could really take this advice and not go the safe route and just pursue this. So I end up going through and applying for the DC internship. This was a little nerve wracking. I didn't know if I was going to get it. It kind of felt like I was shooting for the stars at that point. I wasn't confident in my resume. I didn't have the traditional experience, perhaps, of research projects and prior internship experience in a think tank or prior internship experience here. And now I'm applying to the DC office. DC office is Congress. It's not, they're inseparable. They're the same thing. Like you think of Congress, that's what DC is. That's what that's what they're speaking about. Like there's no higher position you can go for. That's the most competitive. And so I ended up applying and I get an interview. Man, when I get an interview, I was on a call with a friend and I was like, dude, I just got an interview. I just got an interview. There's no way, there's no way, there's no way. So prior from other experiences, here's what I did differently. I had Eric Feldman from FIUDC help me with my resume. He helped me with my resume. He helped me with my cover letter. And I had like, at that point, I had gotten over like 10 people look over my resume. I just started adding like a bunch of Model UN kids to my resume on my Google Doc and them giving comments and everything. I was just wanting to get as much feedback as possible. So I had a better polished resume that at least aesthetically I was proud of, even if the experience was not something that I was necessarily so fond of at the moment. And so I end up doing that. And at the very end, I go through with this application and I get an interview. So I'm like, yes, I got an interview. Let's go. Obviously, way more excited at that point. And when someone tells me, it's like, oh, you get an interview, that means you're qualified. I'm like, there's no way. How? And then I go through with a call with Eric Philman again. And I was like, hey, I have an interview. I need some help. And he kind of helps me out to plan out a little cheat sheet or some ideas of what they could ask me, ways to prepare. And so I have some ideas of what I could ask, what they could be asking me. I prepare for the interview. I go through with it. I do the interview. And there was maybe one question that threw me off guard, which was like, what are three politicians you look up to? And what are some policies that you align with them. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, I didn't prepare for this. I was like, Diaz Balart for sure. Diaz Balart is included. Diaz Balart is the congressman I worked for. And then I had mentioned two other politicians. I think I had butchered the last one. I wasn't 100% sure. And I kind of blurred out the response, if I'm being honest. I wasn't too confident in it. But it's okay because some of those things happen. You wasn't 100% sure. But what surprised me about the interview was very much like it was coordinated in a way that seemed like I was getting it. Okay, so yeah, so this is how the internship is. You would be doing this, you would be doing that, and it would be virtual. This is, mind you, I applied for the summer internship, and it would be a virtual internship. We're still during the pandemic. We're still in the pandemic. We're still recovering from the COVID pandemic, and it's just so many components that it would have to be a virtual internship, even if it's a DC experience. And I was okay with that. I was okay with that because at the very least, like, I didn't have to spend money on an apartment. I wasn't gonna have like a monetary, uh, I guess, barrier to do the internship. I was still gonna get the experience on my resume. All of that was gonna matter to me. Of course, all things considered, I would prefer to be in DC in person. Who wouldn't be? And so I end up doing that, and I get a follow up email, and at first it said we had to choose other candidates for the summer internship, something like that, along those words. I don't remember the specific words, and I was like, oh man, I was like, I didn't get the offer. I was like, I shot for DC, and they didn't give me the offer. At least I got an interview, but man, now what do I do? I read the whole email, and they said, but we want to give you an opportunity for the fall of 2021. And I was like, what? I essentially got the offer. I got the offer, but not for the summer, for the fall. The fall. Summer is 2.5 months. The fall is almost 5 months. That's almost double the amount of time I would do the internship. And I was like, oh my God. At first, I was like, wait, but I don't know if I could do fall. Fall, I have so many classes, or I want to graduate on time. Like, I don't know if I could do this, but I'm like, I got an offer. I got an offer. And in my head, it's still virtual. I was celebrating. I was celebrating because I'm like, I'm getting this experience, I'm doing all this stuff, and maybe a little glimmer of hope in my brain that maybe I could actually go to DC. Because I'm like, if the summer isn't open, maybe the fall will be. But I had no particular idea of how it could work. And so I started seeing people like my friends that did internships in DC, and like people that I looked up to, people that I thought were like at another level from me. And I got the offer too. Like, it was just a crazy experience. I started looking at photos of people on LinkedIn, taking pictures in DC, and I'm like, that's gonna be me. But except I didn't really fully know if I was gonna go to DC. But I was like, at the very least, I'm getting the experience. I got the offer. You feel me? Like, I was like, oh my God, like I I got a not like it was just a awakening moment. I was like, there's no way, like, I'm gonna work in Congress. Like, I got the internship, like, I got the offer. I forgot to mention that one of the biggest things that stood out in the interview was my podcast. The very thing my brother told me. He said, do something during the pandemic. And I was like, I don't have internships, I don't have this. Do something. The do something was my own project, was my own version of what I wanted to do. And it served as an extracurricular that helped me stand out for the internship. What happened? I wasn't number one option. I wasn't number two option. Maybe I wasn't number three option. I don't know how many interns they had in the summer. But I had gotten a chance. I had reached for the stars, and by the thread, I grasped on it. And that was all that mattered. It didn't matter how I got it, it didn't matter what rank I was. I got it. I did it. And to my knowledge, I was the only person that they extended another offer for. Perhaps other people did have the experience I was thinking I didn't have. the think tanks, the research projects, the this and that, and the fancier things. But they saw something in me that made them think we still want him. Might as well secure him for the fall. We don't have to go through this again, even if he's third place. That's what matters. What ends up happening? Now, the logistics of how I ended up landing this internship, how I ended up going through with it. At this point, I'm not sure if I'm going to DC. I wanna finish in the fall semester, and I just wasn't sure how to do it. At this rate, I start getting this interest towards a program that my university has called the Hamilton Scholars Program. And unlike what you think, it's not the formal Hamilton Scholar Program that is nationwide. It's a specific one that my university has that they started like a year before during the pandemic, and it's a specific scholarship that they give to students who are intending to do internships in DC. So you apply, you would do a program like a little class in DC, an advocacy project, along with like them helping you land an internship. And I was really attracted to it because I'm like, I would love to do this. I would love to be part of the Hamilton Scholars Program. That would be super cool, and I get a scholarship too. Like that would be amazing. But I was thinking in my head, I'm like, I already have an internship though. Does that mean that I don't qualify? Because they're supposed to, you apply and then they help you get an internship. And me being so limited, I'm like, well, don't you think it would be even easier? Don't you think I would be in a much more valuable position by already having an internship offer? Because here's the thing, at that point, at that point where people are applying in May of 2021, people are applying to the Hamilton Scholars Program. I already had an offer for the fall. People are applying to the Hamilton Scholars Program with the intention of then applying to fall internships to then go to DC. Because that's the thing. If you did the Hamilton Scholars Program, you were going to go to DC. No and if or buts. And I was like, I don't know if I can afford DC. I don't know if I can do it. Like, I have a class I need to take my last semester in person. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be overwhelmed if I'm in DC. I have to take all online classes. Like, how is this going to work? And the scholarship money was not like a significant amount to cover all the expenses. And so in this case, I was like, okay, I have an advantage because I have the internship offer already compared to anyone else that's applying. Even the coordinator of this program told me to apply to the program, and I'm like, okay. I was here limited. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I ended up finding out that that very class that I had to take in person was not going to be changed. I had to take it in person. And you know what I was going to do? I was going to cut my losses. I was going to cut my losses and be like, I just can't go to DC. I'm not going to apply to the Hamilton program. I can't go to DC. I have to take this class in person, and I want to graduate on time. How limited was I thinking? How limited was I thinking? The valuable experience of being in DC, you're gonna let that go so easily? And then my sister told me, she's like, you're gonna let that go so easily? If I were you, I'd try my best to go to DC. I'd try my absolute best. And at this point, the other added factor is that they weren't fully sure. The Congress wasn't fully sure if they were gonna have in-person internships. All this in my head, I had kind of heard that from the coordinator that they were gonna move it to in person. That if you wanted to do in person, you could, but it was intended to be virtual. And so I was a little in my head about it. I'm like, there's just so many barriers here that between the, if I go to DC, will I even be able to like attend my internship in person? If I go to DC, will I have the expenses to pay for it? If I go to DC, how am I going to take the in-person class that I had already talked to my professor about, that it has to be in person? Like, what am I going to do? And so I end up going through with this decision. I'm like, if I apply to the Hamilton Scholars Program, they say that if you get in, you're secured. Like, you can't back out of it. Like, you're in. So I was like, oh man, like, what am I going to do? I ended up making this a little bit of a decision here. I wanted to graduate in the fall. I had this idea that like I wanted to graduate early. I wanted to take advantage of the fact that I got in my associates in high school and really just get the most bang for my buck. Little did I think that I'm like I could just extend my graduation. I ended up calculating my credits. Started doing some calculations. And I ended up realizing I had to take another class. And I was like, it would be really overwhelming to take like 6, 7 classes in DC to graduate on time when I could maybe just split it up. To get my scholarship, I need to take 4 classes each semester. I could maybe skip the summer and take 4 classes in the fall, 4 classes in the spring, and graduate spring of 2022. And that would allow me to take the final class I need to take with that professor that's in person in the spring of 2022, and then just do online classes in the fall. I ended up kind of coordinating all this together, and I'm like, wait, this can work. So I applied to the program. I apply to the program. Mind you, I still have to go through an interview. I still have to do all this stuff. And I end up meeting with the dean. The dean of the Honors College of FIU meets with me. Mind you, at this point, I have not been in the Honors College. I had not had the highest GPA in high school, despite actually getting my associates, believe it or not. I think I graduated like a 3.1 GPA and had like a 4.4 weighted. It's just another story for another day. My high school experience and how I was able to get my associates with a 3.1 GPA unweighted. And I was never in the honors program. I applied, I didn't get in, and at that point during the before the pandemic, you had to do a lot of volunteer hours, you had to do a lot of extra stuff. A lot of people said it wasn't worth it. It wasn't really worth it to graduate with honors. Like it's just a medal, it's just an added thing to your experience. And I was like, whatever, I'm gonna try it out. I didn't end up getting in though, so I have at this point I'm not in honors, is what I'm trying to say. The dean of the honors college reaches out to me after applying to the Hamilton Scholars Program, and I think I had gotten accepted or I got an offer. I don't remember what happened. I meet with the dean of the honors college, and he's like, "Hey, listen, you're a very bright student." So I'm like, "Wow, I'm already considered prestigious in the university. It's super cool." I knew I had good grades, but I wasn't like standing out in the Model UN. So at that point, I was like, "I guess this is what's carrying me, this congressional experience." So I meet with the dean in his office, like in physically, like I met with him physically. We took off the masks and everything. Um, at that point, it was like consent. It was like, okay, you could take off the mask. We're 6 feet apart. We're good, you know. And we end up speaking, and he says, "I want you to be part of the honors college." And I was like, "Well, Dean, like this is my last year. Like, I would have to graduate in the spring. Like, I don't have enough credits. Like, I would have to take a bunch of classes." Because he's like, in order for you to be part of the program, you have to be part of the honors college. And I was like, man, this is like another barrier. I'm not in part of the honors program. And he was like, what we can do is I'll waive some of the credits for you, and you could do this. You get 3 credits from the advocacy project that you're supposed to do in DC. Because I was like, I can still do the advocacy project, but I can't take credits because I'm not an honor student. I can't take that class. It was supposed to be, this Hamilton program was supposed to be meant for honors college students. I wasn't. And so they had to take this extra class that was exclusive to honors, that I'm like, I can't enroll in it, but I don't mind doing the advocacy project as like an extracurricular and just be part of the class. And he's like, no, 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 that's not how it works. So he ends up figuring out a way to get me in honors. He gets me in honors. I didn't have to apply or anything. He waived some credits for me. He's like, listen, here's what we're gonna do. You're gonna do an advocacy project your last semester. No, you're gonna do the advocacy project. You're gonna take the honors class, and you're gonna do a research project that's worth 6 points, 6 college credits, and you're gonna do it in the spring semester. And that's it. It's an extra class, but everything else is waived. At the moment, at honors college, there isn't like volunteer work experience. You don't need to get a volunteer hours. You don't need to attend events. You don't need to do all this extra stuff. You're just part of the honors college. It's a pandemic, so they waived a lot of this stuff. A lot of people are not on campus. They can't attend the events. And I was like, oh, snap. And then I get out of that meeting and I'm like, oh my God, everything's aligning. So at this point, I'm pretty much like guaranteed going to DC. The only thing I'm unsure about is like how I'm going to pay all the DC expenses and how exactly I'm going to, after getting that congressional experience, I don't know if I would be like actually in person in Congress, even if I was in DC. And then I was able to coordinate getting in the Honors College of FIU. So I was like, wow, all the stars are aligning. Fast forward a little more, we end up they end up taking a trip with all the Hamilton scholars, because mind you, this has been a program that's been like a year old. Only two other cohorts did this program, and it was all virtual. We were going to be the first cohort in person. We were literally going to be the first cohort where we were going to take a class in the FIUDC office, and we were all going to like live there, be there, get internships there, and so be in DC. And I was like, man, all this is working so great. And in the July, where people are starting to land their internships, people are starting to be prepared for the fall. We're all going to DC. It's happening. Let's go. They end up planning a trip with all of us to go to DC for a weekend. And then I coordinate with the my supervisor, my new supervisor for Congress. Um, we end up going through like the whole, like we end up coordinating a visit. I end up coordinating a visit with her, and at some point I meet her in the building, and she gives me a tour of like the whole like inside, and I was like, there's no way I'm gonna work here, like what the heck. It's like DC. And then I get like a little visitor pass. I start to see like all these people in suits, everyone dressed super nice. It's pretty hot in the summer, not gonna lie. Anyways, I get that preview and I was like, oh my God, like everything's aligning. And we kind of confirmed, she's like, maybe you can come like one day to the office. We'll see how things are in August. Like she was a little bit more reasonable at that point. We were just unsure about the pandemic. That's the primary thing. It's still 2021, you know? And at this point, I know I'm graduating in 2022. I already have my classes for the fall, and I'm just ready to ride the wave. Around the same time, maybe a couple weeks before, I had been looking for internships, for scholarships, and I run into this scholarship sponsored by Cafe Bustelo. Cafe Bustelo, the American coffee brand that everyone's dad drinks. And I ended up applying for it. It was just like an essay. And I was like, I can write an essay. $5,000 scholarship. I ended up going through with the essay, and this process lasts a couple months. Not gonna lie, it lasts a couple months. Um, I end up going to DC. So I end up going to DC. I have the Hamilton scholarship. I have my refund money from FIU. Mind you, I had a full ride to FIU and financial aid. So I wasn't paying for college. I was getting paid to go to college, and I was using that money to pay off some things from DC. And then I also had the paid congressional internship. Shout out to Pay Our Interns. I actually met the co-founder of Pay Our Interns in FIU DC. He can be more grateful for the initiative that him and other creators, founders had of that project, the nonprofit Pay Our Interns. The initiative they had that was able to push every congressional office to have a budget for interns. It was a crazy like logro, a crazy uh, achievement for the, for every intern to get paid. So I was gonna be a little tight, but I was gonna be able to get through, ideally not paying anything that semester out of pocket. I was just gonna be able to pay everything and not get any loans or anything. Um, and mid semester, mind you, I'm already working in Congress, and I actually do work in person. I end up working in person most days, and it was such a cool experience. Like she would tell me like, okay, you can come this day this week, you can come that day this week. I think it got to a point later in the semester where I was just going like every day. Man, I'm honestly reminiscing right now of like that experience, and I'm like, man, that was such a great experience. I mean, I I'm so grateful to have lived that. Like just to internalize a little bit, I was just so grateful to have been in that office and been there. And My co-intern was actually a law school grad that had just been trying to find job opportunities, so he wanted to get something on the side. He was literally my only co-intern. So I was like me, a 20-year-old senior at FIU that barely got into that internship with like a law school grad that's like already passed the bar and everything. He's just looking for jobs. It's like, what? What a great experience. What a great experience. So mid semester, I end up I end up hearing back that I become a finalist for the Cafe Bustelo scholarship, and I end up having to submit like I don't remember if it was a video or an extra like essay or some details or something, but I became a finalist, and I ended up getting the scholarship, which was just the cherry on top of everything. I mean, at this point, like, what came out of this? Brian did not have a single internship offer. He had done his own way. He had found a way to get some experience in something he was passionate about, which was politics. Decided to do a podcast, The Missing Bridge in America. And then I end up getting this internship offer by the thread for an even better semester that was longer. That was I was actually able to go to DC. I got into honors college. I did the Hamilton Scholars Program. um, I did a supplementary research essay at FIU, and it just became like this full circle moment on top of the Cafe Bustelo scholarship. Like that year was just, oh my God. Like if I can think of, wow, a year prior to that where I was barely starting my podcast, I was with my sister, and I was like, man, I'm just so discouraged. I was almost about to cry. I'm like, all these people are getting internships and I'm not getting internships, and like I don't know what I'm gonna do. I graduate in a year. Like then I was starting to even like think of all my everything I worked hard for in high school. Everything I worked hard for to get more credits, to graduate earlier, to get ahead faster, was it all gonna go to the grave? Was it all gonna go to waste? That was my biggest concern, and it didn't. And I honestly, I can't give all the credit to myself. I had to thank God. I had to thank God for everything aligning in the way it did. A lot of those things, some things were under my control, but in every way, shape, or form, I can't say I did everything on my own hands. Um, and I'm just so grateful for everything to have turned out the way it did. I mean, I could easily complain about pandemic and yeah, like I had a few semesters of college taken away from me and just indoors doing classes, but I had nowhere near as bad of an experience as other people, and I can't just I really just can't be ungrateful for my college experience. I think I literally checked every single box I wanted to. I wanted to enter the Model UN team, which was number one ranked in the nation. I was part of that team. Like we were in the news. Like we got spotlights on us, and I even went to a conference right before the pandemic ended, and I made some great friends that are now like in Georgetown doing great things, in DC, like interning for senators, interning for this, working in think tanks, like achieving their dreams. Some graduated law school and like some very competitive law schools. I was like, not only was my entering class like just such a bright class at FIU, and specifically in the Model UN team, the connections I made, people in DC that I see now, and I'm like, they're absolutely killing it in their own endeavors, in their own industries. And I'm just like, wow, what a great experience. And to anyone out there that is looking to apply to an internship, that maybe feels that self doubt, doesn't really know where to go, first of all, seek some advice. Don't be afraid to knock on the doors of people that have been in the opportunities before you, or even people with just a little bit more experience. I can be one of those people. I have LinkedIn and I can help you out, but there are other people that have a lot of experience in this area that have helped a lot of more people get internships, and it's just such a valuable opportunity, to be able to know what you're capable of and have someone push you past the edge of actually uh, just throwing your rod in the river and seeing if the fish is gonna hang on the hook. Which most of the time, if someone's telling you to do it, it's because they really believe in you and they know things that you don't. You may think you're not experienced enough, you may think you're not capable enough, but you aren't until you are. One of the reflective points, what is it now? 4 years later, um, that since the application season of going through this internship and everything, is you are because you do. You are because you do. Um, did I feel like I compared to like the delegates in the Model UN team that were getting all these awards at Harvard conferences, at Yale conferences, at NYU conferences, and I didn't. I went to one conference for Model UN. I didn't even get an award. Like nothing. No, no, no. It's not a single award. And I really, I mean, it kind of lowered my self esteem a little bit. I didn't think I was the best in Model UN. Regardless, it served me. It helped me with my public speaking skills. I maybe wasn't the most dynamic as a holistic person, and like being able to give speeches and then lead groups to formulate resolution papers. I was good at some things, but that didn't matter at the end of the day. It didn't matter at the end of the day. When you're in a congressional internship, what are you doing? You're filing papers. You're looking at congressional bills and seeing where the congressman stands on them and writing some memos. And I had written a lot of papers in political science classes. And maybe there was a million people that were more qualified than I was, but I applied. I sold myself. I helped. I got helped by people that helped me, magnify my application to what it was. And that to me was probably the most valuable out of everything. I just can't thank FIUDC enough. I can't thank the Hamilton Scholarship enough. I can't thank FIU Honors College and the Dean of the Honors College enough for all the help that they gave me throughout that time and everything. Cafe Bustelo as well. I was highlighted that semester. It was a pretty it was a semester where I think people really looked at me. Like when I was in these advocacy projects, networking events, the people at FIUDC, they're like, he's working for this guy, and he got a Gafeuso scholarship. Like even more than other people that had other internship, they would look at me because the guy I was working for was one of the very close congressmen that worked with FIU. So all these things combined, it was just, how could I complain? It was a process, it was a journey, it was not perfect, it's not guaranteed. But I can only say that all this came about with just a little bit of a step that came maybe from the webinar, maybe a little bit of research, a little bit of not giving up and not letting the limits of where I think I could be affect my future, neither the limitations of the current times to limit what I could achieve, because I was able to just walk through each step as it came. And then looking back, it just all worked together. And even if it was just a virtual internship, even if I didn't go through the Hamilton program, even if I maybe not everything aligned, I just knew that those five things were possibilities. Those five things ended up happening. But if I never even taken the step of even landing the opportunity, of even going to the webinar to ask that question, you know, where would I be? What would I have? What would I have missed out on? And how different would my college experience be? So, if you're a student watching this, I encourage you to just go after it. Go after it, man. I was the underdog. I felt like I was the underdog. Like I was doing a podcast that I'm like I wasn't getting like so much validation from it, maybe from like family members and some friends. But like I didn't know if I was the best podcaster. I didn't do it long enough to get thousands of followers, thousands of subscribers. Like I did it just enough to feel like I committed to something for a year. And that spoke for something. Even if it was my own thing, even if it was something that maybe wasn't credentialized, or it had like a little asterisk next to it and a little copyright symbol or all rights reserved, something a little more official, it still was valuable. It still helped me out. And so hope you find this valuable. We'll stay in touch.